Today's lesson is maps and scale drawings. We're going to use proportions to solve problems involving scale. The Indiana Academic Standard is 7.5.3. A scale drawing is an enlarged or reduced drawing of an object that is similar to the actual object. Maps are the perfect example of a scale drawing. Also in science class, often you'll have scale drawings of things that are very, very tiny, like a cell. A scale is a ratio that compares a length in a drawing or model to the corresponding length in the actual object. We find scales all the time on maps. It will tell you 1 inch equals 100 miles, or 1 centimeter equals 1,000 kilometers. So we have scales on maps. On any kind of scale drawing, you're going to have a scale that shows you what that relationship is between the actual object and the map or drawing. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. Let's take a look at example 1, using a scale drawing. The scale of a drawing is 1 inch to 6 feet. The length of a wall is 4.5 inches on the drawing. Find the actual length of the wall. You can write the scale of the drawing as 1 inch to 6 feet. Then write a proportion. We're going to let n represent the actual length. So when we set up the second proportion, because we knew the drawing amount of 4.5 inches, that's going to go on the top, and n, the actual length of the wall, is going to go on the bottom because we're putting the inches, the drawing measurement, over the actual measurement of the object. Now we're ready to cross multiply. We're going to cross multiply n times 1, which is 1n, and 6 times 4.5. 1 times n is n. 6 times 4.5 is 27. The actual length is 27 feet. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. Now let's try quick check number 1. Use the same scale as example 1. If an object is 2.5 inches long on the drawing, how long is the actual object? We'll start by setting up the ratio for the scale. The scale was 1 inch equals 6 feet. So I placed 1 inch on top and 6 feet on the bottom for our ratio. Now we're ready to fill in what we know. We know an object on the drawing is 2.5 inches. The drawing measurement is going on the top. Frequently, I will go ahead and have the labels in my problem because often it helps you set the problem up. That way you can match the labels up. Now occasionally the labels are all the same and that doesn't help. But in this case, since we're talking about inches and feet, we know that the inches involves the drawing and the feet is the actual object. So we have 1 inch over 6 feet equals 2.5 inches over n. Now we're ready to cross multiply. We're going to multiply n times 1, so we have 1n on the left, and 6 times 2.5 on the right. 1n is simply n, and 6 times 2.5 is 15. So the actual length of the object is 15 feet. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. For example number 2, we're going to take a look at a map of North Carolina. We're going to find the actual distance from Asheville to Raleigh. We're going to use a centimeter ruler to find the map distance from Asheville to Raleigh. The map distance is 4.4 centimeters. Use a proportion to find the actual distance. Let n represent the actual distance. Well, from our map, we can see that our scale is 1 centimeter equals 75 kilometers. So we write that as our first ratio. The second ratio is going to be the map distance, which is 4.4, over n, because we don't know the actual distance. We're going to cross multiply, so we take 1 times n, so we have 1 times n on the left, and 75 times 4.4 on the right. On the left, 1n becomes n, and 75 times 4.4 is 330. The actual distance from Asheville to Raleigh is about 330 kilometers. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. For example 3, finding the scale. The actual length of a wheelbase of a mountain bike is 260 centimeters. The length of the wheelbase in a scale drawing is 4 centimeters. Find the scale of the drawing. So we write the 4 centimeters on the top because that's the scale length. We write the actual length on the bottom of 260. We need to simplify this, write it in simplest form. 4 will go into both 4 and 260. So we divide 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 260 divided by 4 is 65. So the scale is 1 centimeter to 65 centimeters. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. It's a little difficult to measure on my computer screen, but I figured it to be roughly 3 centimeters. In your homework, you won't have to do any actual measurements, so we're not going to have issues of, well, I measured a little bit different than someone else. So we're going to say that from Charlotte to Raleigh is 3 centimeters. We start by setting up the scale ratio. 1 centimeter equals 75 kilometers. So 1 centimeter over 75 kilometers. That's going to equal the 3 centimeter measurement over n, because we don't know the actual. Now we're ready to cross multiply. N times 1 will be on the left, so we have 1n, and on the right we'll have 75 times 3. For the left-hand side, 1 times n is n, and 75 times 3 is 225. So the actual distance from Charlotte to Raleigh is 225 kilometers. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class. For the final example, number 3, the length of a room in an architectural drawing is 10 inches. The actual length is 160 inches. What is the scale of the drawing? We're going to put the drawing measurement of 10 inches on the top for this ratio and the actual length of 160 inches on the bottom. Now we're going to simplify it. 10 can go into both 160 and 10, so we divide both by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1, and 160 divided by 10 is 16. So the scale of the drawing is 1 inch equals 16 inches. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to copy down the notes. Don't forget, you have to have a question for class tomorrow, so be sure as you go through the lesson, if there's something that you don't understand, write it down and we'll talk about it in class.